My name is Axel. Have you ever stumbled upon something so inexplicable that it feels as though the very air around you has thickened with ancient secrets? On one such night, when the wind whispered tales of forgotten lore, I found myself ensnared in a hidden glade that pulsed with an energy that was anything but natural. The moon hung low, casting an eerie glow on a gathering of shadowy figures encircling a rustic altar. They swayed as they chanted, their voices weaving through the night like tendrils of smoke, while wolves with piercing eyes howled in a haunting harmony. In that moment, I realized I was witnessing a ritual that time itself had seemingly forsaken. As a forest ranger in the Willamette National Forest, I have spent years learning to interpret the subtle signs of nature. I've walked these trails so many times that I can almost feel the heartbeat of the land beneath my feet. Yet, despite the countless stories I've heard of ancient rituals and forgotten deities, I had always dismissed them as mere folklore, tales meant to instill reverence for the wild. But there, enveloped in the sharp, biting wind, I felt a chilling truth. The secrets of the forest were not just remnants of imagination. They were dark realities that could awaken at any moment. Driven by an instinct to protect the land I loved, I edged closer to the ritual. Each symbol etched into the earth seemed to pulse with meaning, each incantation an invocation of forces that transcended time itself. My heart raced as I recognized the gravity of what was unfolding before my eyes. The participants were not merely honoring the old ways, they were seeking a pact with entities that had long been forgotten, beings that could tip the balance of nature toward chaos. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. What if their actions unleashed a darkness that could engulf everything I held dear? In that instant, a conflict ignited within me. Should I intervene and challenge traditions woven into the very fabric of this land? Or should I stand back, a silent witness to a malevolent force that had lain dormant for centuries? The weight of my duty pressed heavily on my chest. I had always believed that to protect the forest was to respect its mysteries. But what if those mysteries contained a threat more profound than I could fathom? As I considered my options, the glade transformed into a character of its own, alive with a palpable tension that seemed to pulse with each chant. The towering trees around me leaned in, their branches like gnarled fingers, eager to eavesdrop on the unfolding drama. The air smelled of damp earth and something acrid, a scent that hinted at the raw power being summoned in that sacred space. The shadows danced, and I felt the weight of the past pressing against my shoulders, urging me to choose wisely. But when night fell, something inexplicable happened. I could feel the energy in the glade shift, thickening like fog rolling in from the coast. As the chanting rose to a fever pitch, the shadows began to coalesce into shapes. Figures that were once indistinct now emerged with clarity. A woman, tall and regal, stepped forward from the circle, her long dark hair cascading like a waterfall down her back. She wore a cloak woven from what appeared to be the very essence of the night, and her eyes glimmered with a feral intensity that held me captive. I instinctively stepped back, but my feet felt rooted to the ground. Who dares trespass upon this sacred ground? Her voice sliced through the air like a knife, sharp and commanding. I swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how exposed I was. I had never felt so vulnerable in my life, standing in the heart of a gathering that was as ancient as the trees themselves. I'm a ranger, I stammered, my voice trembling. I was just passing through. Passing through? She echoed, her voice laced with mockery. Or are you here to disrupt what has long been forgotten? Before I could respond, another figure emerged from the shadows, a man with a weathered face and eyes that mirrored the depths of the forest. He stepped closer and placed a hand on the woman's shoulder, his presence radiating a calm that contrasted sharply with her intensity. "Kalia, hold your wrath," he said, his tone soft, yet authoritative. "This one is not our enemy. He is but a witness drawn by the very forces we seek to awaken. Kalia's expression shifted, veering from hostility to curiosity. "What do you know of our purpose, Ranger?" I hesitated, grappling with my words. "I know enough to understand that what you're doing isn't safe. This forest, these woods, are alive. You can't just summon powers without consequences," the crowd murmured, their interest piqued. I glanced around, noting the mixed expressions of intrigue and apprehension on their faces. Some seemed to share my concern, while others appeared entranced by the idea of awakening something long buried. But you misunderstand," the man interjected, his voice soothing like a breeze. "We are not merely summoning, we are restoring balance. The old ways have been suppressed for too long. The forest cries out for its guardians." "Guardians?" I scoffed. "You mean the very forces that could bring chaos? You have no idea what you're tampering with." Kalia's eyes flared with indignation, but before she could retort, a low rumble echoed through the glade, shaking the ground beneath us. The wolves, once howling in a rhythmic harmony, turned restless, their growls morphing into something primal and feral. The shadows around us shifted again, growing darker, more alive, as if they were responding to the turmoil. "What have you done?" I shouted, my heart racing. The man, now looking uneasy, turned to the group. "We must proceed. There is no turning back now." "But it's too dangerous," I protested, feeling the weight of their decision pressing on my chest. "You can't control what you've awakened." Kalia stepped forward, her face inches from mine, the air electric with her defiance. "You wish to protect what you do not understand, Ranger. But what if our actions are the only way to save this forest from a greater threat? A darkness that has long lain in wait?" Her words hung in the air, and I felt a flicker of doubt. Maybe I didn't understand the full scope of the danger at hand. Maybe their intentions were not entirely malevolent. But as the shadows deepened and the wolves' growls grew louder, I became painfully aware that this was no longer just about the forest. It was about me and the choices I would have to make in the heart of this ancient ritual. Then, just as the tension reached its peak, the ground trembled again, and from the center of the altar, a blinding light erupted, illuminating the glade in a surreal glow. My instincts screamed at me to run, but I felt an invisible thread binding me to this moment, forcing me to confront the enigmatic forces at play. With the ritual now spiraling beyond anyone's control, I had to decide. Would I join them in their dangerous pact, or would I stand against them, risking everything to protect the wilderness I cherished? The weight of my choice loomed larger than the shadows themselves, and the night was far from over. The blinding light pulsed with an almost sentient energy, and as I squinted against its brilliance, memories began to swarm my mind like restless spirits. I was no longer just a ranger. I was a child again, lost in the woods behind my childhood home, where shadows danced among the trees and whispers floated through the leaves. My mother had always warned me about the forest's secrets, about the ancient spirits that roamed its depths. They were protectors, she said, but they could easily turn to avengers if provoked. And then there was the night I had wandered too far, the night that had haunted my dreams. I had stumbled upon a gathering much like this one, a circle of figures, their faces obscured, chanting in a language that felt familiar yet foreign. The air had crackled with power, and I had felt it then, too, that intoxicating pull. But something had gone wrong. I remembered the screams, the burning light, and then nothing. Just darkness. "Ranger!" Kalia's voice cut through my reverie, snapping me back to the present. "You must decide. Will you stand with us, or will you flee like a coward?" The accusation stung, but I felt something deeper, an unsettling connection between my past and this moment. What if I had been drawn here for a reason? What if the darkness that had once terrified me was not simply a memory, but a part of me? As if reading my thoughts, the man beside Kalia spoke again, his voice tinged with urgency. You're not just an observer, are you? You have a history with the forest. It calls to you just as it calls to us. I shook my head, trying to deny the truth behind his words. No, I'm just a ranger. I protect the woods, that's all. Protect? Kalia laughed bitterly. You think you can shield this land from its own nature? You're naive. The forest craves what we are awakening. It needs us. Panic clawed at my insides. But if you awaken it, what will happen? What if it destroys everything? Your ritual is necessary, she interjected, her eyes blazing like twin stars. You think the shadows are the only danger? There are far worse things lurking outside this glade, and they are closing in. A chill raced through me, and I suddenly understood. This was not just about the forest. Something worse was coming, something that had been lurking in the periphery, waiting for the right moment to strike. I had felt it too, hadn't I? The dark whispers on the wind, the strange shadows that had flickered at the edges of my vision. Then, a figure emerged from the trees, cloaked in darkness and dread. It was a specter of my past, a manifestation of my deepest fears. I recognized the face, my own, or rather, a twisted reflection of who I once was, a ghost of the child I had left behind. Do you remember? The figure asked, its voice a haunting echo of my mother's warnings. You were never meant to forget. You were chosen. My heart raced, and the energy in the glade shifted again, a swirling tempest of fear and revelation. I realized then that my sanity was slipping, that the line between reality and memory was blurring. I was not just a bystander. I was a player in a game far more complex than I had ever imagined. Kalia and the man turned to face the specter, their expressions shifting from uncertainty to recognition. You know him? Kalia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, the specter replied, its gaze fixed on me, and it is time for you to choose once more. The air thickened, and I felt the weight of their expectations, the pressure of the forest's past pressing down on me. I had to confront not only the darkness that threatened to engulf us, but also the shadows of my own history. As the murmurs of the crowd grew louder, I faced the specter, realizing that my choice was not just about protecting the woods, it was about reclaiming my own identity. The night was far from over, and the true test of my resolve was just beginning. The specter loomed before me, a haunting silhouette of my past, and I felt the weight of every choice I had ever made pressing down on my chest. You were chosen, it repeated, the words echoing in my mind, twisting like a dagger. Chosen for what? To bear the burden of forgotten truths? To stand against the very shadows my mother had warned me about? Or perhaps to embrace them? Kalia stepped closer, her eyes gleaming with an intensity I had never seen before. You can't run from this, Ranger. You have the power to change the outcome. Join us. Help us awaken what lies beneath. Her urgency sent ripples of doubt through me. Did I truly want to awaken the forest's secrets? Or was this just another way to unleash chaos? Beside her, the man, whose name I still didn't know, nodded in agreement. You've felt it, haven't you? The darkness that lurks just beyond the trees? It's not just a memory, it's a living thing and it's hungry. We need to harness that power to protect the light that remains. Their words wrapped around me like vines, constricting my thoughts and blurring the lines between right and wrong. I glanced back at my twisted doppelganger, its eyes hollow yet somehow filled with sorrow. What do you want from me? I demanded, my voice trembling. To remember, it whispered, a chilling breeze stirring the leaves around us. To embrace the truth of who you are. I felt the ground shift beneath me, the forest itself seeming to pulse with life and anticipation. In that moment, I was flooded with memories, my mother's laughter, the warmth of the sun filtering through the trees, and the fear that had driven me to forget. No, I said, shaking my head violently. I am not that child anymore. I am a ranger. I protect these woods. Kalia's expression darkened. And what good is protection when you deny the very essence of what you guard? The forest doesn't need a shield. It needs a conduit, The specter's form flickered as if caught in a tempest, and I felt a surge of energy wash over me, a blend of fear and resolve. "What if I refuse?" I asked, my heart pounding. "What if I turn away?" "Then everything will be lost," the specter hissed, the shadows swirling in an angry dance around it. "You are the key. You must choose to accept your past, or it will consume you." The tension in the glade escalated, the air thick with anticipation. I could feel the eyes of the gathered figures upon me, their hopes and fears resting on my shoulders. In that moment, the forest whispered secrets I could barely grasp, and I knew that my decision would not just impact me, it would ripple through the very fabric of this land. I inhaled deeply, the scent of pine and earth grounding me, and looked at the specter and the two figures before me. It was time to confront both my past and the encroaching darkness. "I will not flee," I declared, my voice steadying, "but I will not awaken the shadows blindly. If I am to embrace this power, I will do it on my own terms." The ground trembled. Beneath my feet, the energy of the glade shifting once more, and I prepared to face whatever came next. The path ahead was fraught with peril, but I could no longer ignore the truth of my existence. The night was alive, and it was only just beginning. I felt the ground quake beneath me as my declaration hung in the air, a fragile thread of resolve in a tempest of uncertainty. The specter's wail pierced the stillness, a sound both mournful and furious that echoed through the trees. Shadows coiled tighter around me, swirling like a storm. I braced myself, every muscle tensed, as the energy within the glade surged, clashing with my own. Kalia's eyes widened, realization dawning too late. "No, you can't control it," she shouted, but her voice was lost in the cacophony of howling, winds and rustling leaves. The air crackled with power, and I felt the shadows reach for me, seeking to consume the light I had left. The confrontation escalated, and I focused on the memories flooding my mind. My mother's warnings, the laughter of the forest, the darkness I had buried deep within. I held on to those threads, weaving them into a shield against the encroaching void. But with every pulse of energy, I felt pieces of myself fracture, old wounds reopening as the shadows clawed at the edges of my consciousness. "Ranger!" The man's voice broke through the chaos, his urgency a lifeline. "You have to channel it. Focus on the light." I closed my eyes, summoning every ounce of strength. I could feel the pain radiating through me, a burning reminder of my past, but I refused to let it define me. "I am not just a vessel for your darkness," I cried out, my voice raw and defiant. "I am the guardian of this forest." In that moment, a blinding light erupted from within me, a brilliant flare that pushed back the shadows. I felt the specter recoil, its form flickering, uncertain. The energy crackled around me, illuminating the glade with a fierce glow. I was both terrified and exhilarated, but I could feel the strain of it all. The shadows writhed and screamed, but I held firm, channeling the essence of the forest itself. With one final surge of power, I thrust my hands forward, releasing the light into the depths of the darkness. The shadows recoiled, and with a deafening roar, they dissipated, leaving behind an eerie stillness. I collapsed to my knees, gasping for breath, my body trembling from the exertion. Kalia knelt beside me, her expression a mix of relief and fear. "You did it," she breathed, but I could see the shadows still flickering at the edges of her gaze. But at what cost? The man stood back, watching as the remnants of the darkness scattered into the underbrush, but a shadow remained in his eyes. "The forest is safe, for now, but the balance has shifted. Something else is awakening." I looked up at them, feeling the weight of my scars, both physical and emotional. I had pushed back the darkness, but I knew it was only a temporary reprieve. The tendrils of my past still lingered, and new mysteries awaited just beyond the horizon. Kalia's hand touched my shoulder, a grounding presence. "You chose to embrace your power, but the shadows will return, and they may not come alone." As I caught my breath, I glanced beyond the trees. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that danced ominously. I realized the forest whispered tales of forgotten beings, secrets yet to be uncovered. Let's prepare, I said, determination hardening my resolve. We'll face whatever comes next together, but I will need to understand what lies beneath this power. The air was thick with anticipation, the night still alive with mysteries. I could feel the pull of the unknown, a call to adventure that beckoned just beyond the darkened tree line, and as we stood together, I knew this was only the beginning. I felt the ground quake beneath me as my declaration hung in the air, a fragile thread of resolve in a tempest of uncertainty. The specter's wail pierced the stillness, a sound both mournful and furious that echoed through the trees. Shadows coiled tighter around me, swirling like a storm. I braced myself, every muscle tensed, as the energy within the glade surged. Clashing with my own, Callia's eyes widened, realization dawning too late. "No, you can't control it," she shouted, but her voice was lost in the cacophony of howling winds and rustling leaves. The air crackled with power, and I felt the shadows reach for me, seeking to consume the light I had left. The confrontation escalated, and I focused on the memories flooding my mind, my mother's warnings, the laughter of the forest, the darkness I had buried deep within. I held on to those threads, weaving them into a shield against the encroaching void. But with every pulse of energy, I felt pieces of myself fracture, old wounds reopening as the shadows clawed at the edges of my consciousness. "Ranger!" The man's voice broke through the chaos, his urgency a lifeline. "You have to channel it. Focus on the light." I closed my eyes, summoning every ounce of strength. I could feel the pain radiating through me, a burning reminder of my past, but I refused to let it define me. "I am not just a vessel for your darkness," I cried out, my voice raw and defiant. "I am the guardian of this forest." In that moment, a blinding light erupted from within me, a brilliant flare that pushed back the shadows. I felt the specter recoil, its form flickering, uncertain. The energy crackled around me, illuminating the glade with a fierce glow. I was both terrified and exhilarated, but I could feel the strain of it all. The shadows writhed and screamed, but I held firm, channeling the essence of the forest itself. With one final surge of power, I thrust my hands forward, releasing the light into the depths of the darkness. The shadows recoiled, and with a deafening roar they dissipated, leaving behind an eerie stillness. I collapsed to my knees, gasping for breath, my body trembling from the exertion. Callia knelt beside me, her expression a mix of relief and fear. "You did it," she breathed, but I could see the shadow still flickering at the edges of her gaze. But at what cost? The man stood back, watching as the remnants of the darkness scattered into the underbrush, but a shadow remained in his eyes. "The forest is safe for now, but the balance has shifted. Something else is awakening." I looked up at them, feeling the weight of my scars, both physical and emotional. I had pushed back the darkness, but I knew it was only a temporary reprieve. The tendrils of my past still lingered, and new mysteries awaited just beyond the horizon. Callia's hand touched my shoulder, a grounding presence. "You chose to embrace your power, but the shadows will return, and they may not come alone." As I caught my breath, I glanced beyond the trees. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that danced ominously. I realized the forest whispered tales of forgotten beings, secrets yet to be uncovered. "Let's prepare," I said, determination hardening my resolve. "We'll face whatever comes next together, but I will need to understand what lies beneath this power." The air was thick with anticipation, the night still alive with mysteries. I could feel the pull of the unknown, a call to adventure that beckoned just beyond the darkened tree line, and as we stood together, I knew this was only the beginning. But then it happened. As the moonlight faded, the forest began to shift. I could hear whispers, the echoes of my deepest fears manifesting before my eyes. Callia's face twisted in horror as shadows coalesced into figures from my past, each one a reminder of my failures, my regrets, my inability to save those I loved. They advanced, their forms grotesque and distorted, and I realized with dread that my worst fears had come to life. "No!" I shouted, scrambling to my feet, but the shadows wrapped around me, pulling me into a void of despair. I could feel the weight of their accusations, a haunting reminder of my childhood mistakes, the friendships I had betrayed, the darkness I had embraced in moments of weakness. I felt their icy fingers clutch my heart, squeezing tightly. "Ranger, fight it!" Kalia cried, but her voice faded, drowned out by the cacophony of my nightmares. The man, too, was lost to the shadows, his presence swallowed whole. I was alone, surrounded by the manifestations of my fears, each one a reflection of my soul's corruption. In that moment, I understood the truth. I had not merely faced the darkness, I had welcomed it. The shadows surged and I was engulfed, my screams mingling with the wails of the specters. I had become what I feared most, a lost soul, trapped forever in the nightmare I had tried to escape. As I drifted into the abyss, I felt a chilling realization settle over me. My fears were no longer just whispers in the dark. They were my reality. The forest that had once been my sanctuary was now my prison, and I was its prisoner, condemned to wander in the shadows of my tormented past. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Share with your friends so they can also embark on this mystery-filled adventure. Leave a comment below telling us your favorite part or what kind of ending you'd like to see in a future story. My name is Marcus. Have you ever stumbled upon something so hauntingly beautiful that it gnawed at your sanity, leaving you questioning everything you thought you knew? On a moonless night, while patrolling a narrow trail in the heart of Cherokee National Forest, I found myself ensnared in the grip of such a moment. The air crackled with an eerie stillness as I and my fellow ranger, Jenna, trekked deeper into the thicket, the underbrush clawing at our legs like desperate fingers. Suddenly, we halted in front of an immense tree, its gnarled limbs twisted as if they had been caught in a perpetual struggle against the weight of unseen burdens. Inscribed upon its bark were symbols that seemed to pulse with a life of their own, and a silence enveloped us, thick and suffocating, as though we had crossed an invisible threshold into a realm where the very essence of sorrow lingered. I had heard the whispers about the Tree of Laments since I took on my duties here, yet I had always dismissed them as mere folklore, relics of an age when superstition held sway over reason. But as I stood before that ancient sentinel, I felt the stories I had brushed aside clawing back to life, filling my mind with unsettling imagery of lost souls and forgotten rituals. The tree loomed over us like a watchful guardian, its bark marked by deep grooves that seemed to tell tales of despair, each indentation a testament to the secrets it kept. The forest around us, usually alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures, had fallen silent, as if nature itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to unfold. Jenna's voice broke the stillness, her words laced with apprehension. "Do you feel that, Marcus?" she asked, her eyes wide as they darted nervously to the shadows. I felt it too, a strange pull, an unshakable sense that we were not alone. It was then that we noticed the remnants of a makeshift camp nearby, the ashes of a fire still smoldering, a tattered backpack half buried in the underbrush. The sight sent a chill coursing through me, igniting a primal fear that twisted in my gut. Who had been here, and where had they gone? Determined to unravel the mystery, I stepped closer to the tree, my heart pounding in my chest. Each step felt like an act of defiance against the unyielding weight of the forest's secrets. I knelt to examine the ground, tracing the faint traces of footprints that led away from the campsite, seemingly swallowed by the dense foliage. My mind raced with possibilities. Had they fallen victim to the very fables I had dismissed? The deeper I dug into the earth beneath that tree, the more it felt like I was unearthing a dark history that many would prefer to keep buried. As I examined the ground, an overwhelming sense of dread settled over me. What if this tree, this forsaken monument, was not merely a silent observer of the past, but rather an active participant in a sinister story that had yet to be told? The whispers of the townsfolk echoed in my mind, tales of a curse tied to the tree, of travelers who ventured too close and vanished without a trace. I felt the weight of their fears pressing down on me, the burden of a truth that could either liberate or destroy. But when night fell, something inexplicable happened as the sun dipped below the horizon, surrendering the forest to an oppressive darkness. I felt an inexplicable tension crackling in the air, as if the very fabric of reality was unraveling. Jenna and I stood at the base of the Tree of Laments, our breaths shallow, the oppressive silence now punctuated by distant, ghostly whispers that seemed to swirl around us, taunting and beckoning. I turned to her, the fear mirrored in her eyes, but before I could speak, a rustle in the underbrush caught our attention. Out of the shadows emerged a figure, a man clad in rugged outdoor gear, his face obscured by a hood. He approached cautiously, his demeanor tense, eyes darting around as if he were being hunted. "You shouldn't be here," he warned, his voice low and urgent. "The tree, it's not what you think." I felt an immediate distrust. "And who exactly are you?" I asked, trying to mask my unease with bravado. "Ethan," he replied, pulling down his hood to reveal a weathered face, marked by deep lines of worry. "I'm a researcher. I've been studying this area for years." He swept a hand toward the tree, his expression a mixture of reverence and fear. "That tree holds power, a history that's been buried and forgotten. People come here, seeking answers, but they find only despair." "Despair? What do you mean?" Jenna interjected, her curiosity piqued despite her evident apprehension. Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "There have been disappearances. Hikers, campers, people drawn to the tree, just like you. It feeds on lost hopes, regrets. I've seen it happen." I exchanged a glance with Jenna, a silent agreement passing between us. This was more than just folklore. It was a warning, and we were standing on the precipice of something we couldn't fully comprehend. "What do you want from us?" I pressed, feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavily on my shoulders. As a ranger, my role was to protect, but now I felt like a fool, bewildered and lost in this nightmare. "I need your help," Ethan said, desperation creeping into his voice. "I lost my brother here last year. I've been tracking his last known whereabouts, and I believe he came to this tree. I can't do this alone anymore." I hesitated. The thought of venturing deeper into the unknown with someone who had already suffered such a loss made my heart race. But something about Ethan's plea resonated within me. Perhaps it was the image of Jenna and me, a year from now, still patrolling these woods, haunted by what we could have done. "All right," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "We'll help you find your brother, but we need to be careful." As we began to survey the area around the tree, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. The whispers grew louder, coiling around my mind, making it harder to concentrate. I glanced at Jenna, who was absorbed in her own thoughts, her brow furrowed. "Marcus," she said quietly, "do you think we're safe?" "Safe?" I echoed, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. "I don't know, but we have to keep moving." Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught my eye, a shadow darting between the trees, too quick to be human. I felt a cold dread wash over me. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded grimly. "It's not just the tree. There's more here than we realize. The forest seemed to close in around us, the trees leaning closer, their branches like skeletal fingers. I could feel the weight of the legends pressing down on my mind, and I struggled to maintain my grip on reality. As we ventured further into the thicket, I felt a gnawing sense of unease settle deep in my gut. What had I gotten myself into? The path ahead was shrouded in darkness, and the deeper we went, the more I felt the pull of the Tree of Laments beckoning us towards an inescapable fate. With every step, I could sense the veil between our world and something far more sinister thinning, and I knew that soon the true horror of the forest would reveal itself. The night was just beginning, and I feared it would be a long one. As we pressed deeper into the woods, the whispers intensified, morphing into a cacophony of voices that tugged at the edges of my sanity. I could hear snippets of conversations, desperate cries, and laughter that felt eerily familiar. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog that was creeping into my thoughts, but it was like a weight pressing down on me, distorting reality. "Do you hear that?" I asked Ethan, my voice trembling. He nodded, his expression grave, but Jenna seemed unfazed, her gaze locked ahead as if she were seeing something I couldn't. "It's just the forest," she said, a hint of defiance in her tone. But I wasn't so sure. The air felt heavier, charged with an energy that was both alluring and terrifying. We continued, and as we moved, a sudden chill swept through the trees, causing them to shudder like a living entity. I stopped in my tracks, my heart pounding in my chest as a memory surged to the forefront of my mind. My younger brother, Alex, had once gotten lost in these woods during a camping trip. I had been responsible for keeping him safe, and in a moment of distraction, I had turned my back. The guilt had been a constant shadow in my life, much like the dark forest around me now. "Marcus?" Jenna called, pulling me from my reverie. "You okay?" "Yeah, just thinking," I managed to say, but my mind raced. What if this tree was somehow connected to Alex's disappearance? The thought twisted my gut, and I felt a surge of panic. I had buried that memory deep, convinced I could outrun it. But here, this place was forcing me to confront my past, to confront the reality that perhaps I had never truly let go. "Listen," Ethan interrupted, his voice urgent. "We need to stay focused. If we don't find my brother soon, we might not make it out of here." His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. I could see Jenna's resolve faltering, her eyes darting between Ethan and me, caught between her own fears and our shared responsibility. Just then, the whispers sharpened into a singular voice, clear and piercing. "Help me," it called, drawing me in like a moth to flame. My blood ran cold. I recognized that voice, and it sent a shiver down my spine. It was Alex. "Did you hear that?" I blurted out, my heart racing. The world around me faded, and I felt the forest close in, blurring the lines between the past and present. "Marcus, it's just the tree." Jenna started, but I couldn't hear her. The voice was louder now, more insistent. "Help me." It echoed, and I felt an overwhelming pull toward the Tree of Laments, the source of all our troubles. I stumbled forward, my feet moving of their own accord, until Ethan grabbed my arm. "Don't! You can't trust it," he shouted, but the urgency in his voice barely registered. My mind was reeling, caught in a whirlwind of memories and emotions I had thought long buried. "Marcus, please." Jenna's voice broke through, her grip tightening around my arm. For a moment I could see the fear in her eyes, a reflection of my own. But it was too late. I was already stepping closer to the tree, drawn by a force I couldn't comprehend. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light erupted from the ground, and I stumbled back, disoriented. The whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar, drowning out everything else. When the light faded, I was no longer standing at the base of the Tree of Laments. Instead, I found myself in a clearing, surrounded by the faces of those who had disappeared over the years, lost souls. Their eyes hollow and pleading, they turned toward me, and I realized with horror that I was not just a bystander in this twisted tale. I was part of it. "Help us," they chorused, their voices intertwining with Alex's, and I felt the weight of my past settle heavily on my chest. In that moment, I understood this wasn't just about Ethan's brother or Jenna's fears. It was about redemption, about facing the demons I had run from for so long. The forest had ensnared me in its web, and now I had to confront the truth or be lost forever. Jenna's voice pulled me back to reality as she shouted, "Marcus, don't go. We need to stick together." But the shadows were closing in, and I could feel the pull of the Tree of Laments tightening around me, demanding my attention, demanding my soul. What had I gotten myself into? The night was just beginning, and I feared it would unveil far more than I had ever bargained for. I felt the weight of their hollow gazes pressing down on me, their mouths moving in unison, whispering my name like an incantation. Marcus, help us. Their voices echoed in my mind, drowning out everything else. Panic clawed at my throat as I tried to process the reality around me. The faces were familiar, yet distorted by time and despair. It was as if they were trapped in a memory loop, forever seeking salvation from the very darkness that bound them. Marcus, Jenna's voice broke through the fog, her urgency snapping me back to the moment. I turned to see her and Ethan standing at the edge of the clearing, their faces etched with concern. Please, you can't listen to them. But the whispers drew me closer, their pull magnetic. I wanted to help them, to save them, but deep down, I knew that helping them meant facing the truth about Alex and my own guilt. I took a step forward, and the ground trembled beneath me, cracking open to reveal deeper shadows. Stop, Ethan shouted, his voice rising above the chaos. He surged forward, grasping my shoulder with a grip that felt both reassuring and desperate. You can't save them. They're not real. What if they are? I replied, my voice trembling. I felt the tears prick at my eyes, memories flooding back. I remembered the fear in Alex's eyes as he vanished into the trees, the moment when I realized I'd lost him. What if I can save him? What if this is my chance? No. Ethan's eyes widened in horror. Marcus, this is a trap. They want to pull you in. You can't let them. Jenna stepped beside Ethan, her presence grounding me, but the whispers surged in volume, drowning out reason. Help us! Help us! They were desperate now, pleading, and I could feel the weight of their agony pressing against my chest, threatening to crush me. Marcus, look at me! Jenna's voice cut through the dissonance. I locked eyes with her, searching for clarity amidst the chaos. Remember who you are. You're not just your past. You're more than this guilt. You have to break free. Her words struck a chord, and for a brief moment, the shadows flickered. I turned back to the faces, feeling the desperation clawing at my heart. I'm sorry, I shouted. I can't help you if it means losing myself. As I spoke, the ground beneath me trembled violently. The entities began to writhe, their faces contorting with rage and despair. You will pay, they howled, their voices merging into a dark symphony of anguish. Marcus, run, Ethan yelled, his grip tightening as he pulled me back. I felt his strength anchoring me, reminding me of the bond we shared. But the shadows lunged, tendrils reaching out, grasping at my legs, pulling me toward the abyss. I fought against them, my heart racing, and in that moment, I realized this was my fight, not just for my brother, but for myself. I couldn't let my past define me, nor could I allow it to consume me whole. With a surge of determination, I yelled, I won't be your prisoner! I pulled free from Ethan's grasp, racing toward the Tree of Laments, the heart of this nightmare. The whispers erupted into a deafening roar, but I focused on the clearing ahead, where the light flickered like a beacon of hope. Jenna and Ethan screamed my name, but I pushed forward, ready to confront the truth that had haunted me for far too long. The moment of reckoning was at hand, and I could feel the forest itself holding its breath, waiting for my next move. I hurtled toward the Tree of Laments, my heart pounding in my chest, drowning out the cacophony of anguished whispers. Tendrils snaked around my legs, pulling me back, but I gritted my teeth and pushed through the pain. The tree loomed ahead, its gnarled branches twisting into the sky, a dark sentinel standing against the storm of despair. I reached out, my fingers brushing the rough bark, and in that moment, a jolt of energy surged through me, something ancient and primal. With a roar that echoed through the clearing, I pressed my palms against the tree's trunk. The whispers crescendoed into a deafening scream, and I felt their pain surge into me. Memories, regrets, and guilt crashed over me like waves. I saw Alex's face, etched with fear and confusion, and my own cowardice reflected back at me. But I wasn't just reliving the moment I lost him. I was reclaiming it. I was choosing to confront my fears rather than let them drown me. Suddenly, a blinding light erupted from the tree, illuminating the clearing and forcing the shadows to recoil. The tendrils fell away, retreating into the darkness, and the faces that had haunted me began to dissipate, their cries fading into a haunting silence. I gasped for breath, feeling the weight lift, but the scars remained, visible and invisible, etched into my soul. As the light dimmed, I turned to see Jenna and Ethan running toward me, their expressions a blend of relief and worry. "Marcus," Jenna breathed, her voice trembling as she wrapped her arms around me. I held her tight, savoring the warmth of her presence. But even as I embraced her, I felt the remnants of the shadows lurking at the periphery of my mind, whispering doubts I couldn't shake. Ethan stood beside us, his brow furrowed with concern. "Did you see them? The faces?" he asked, his voice low and strained. "What just happened?" "I confronted them," I replied, my voice hoarse. "But it's not over. I can still feel them. There's something unfinished." Jenna pulled back slightly, studying my face. "You're not the only one affected by this," she said, glancing at Ethan. "What if this darkness isn't just tied to you? What if it's connected to all of us?" A chill crept down my spine as I considered her words. The forest felt different now, the air heavy with unspoken truths. The tree of laments stood silent, but I sensed it held more secrets. Secrets that might still ensnare anyone who dared to approach. As we began to leave the clearing, Ethan paused, staring back at the tree. "We need to figure out what this place really is," he said, a resolute look crossing his face. "We can't just walk away. There could be others like Alex." I nodded, my heart heavy with the weight of my unresolved guilt. "And we need to find a way to make sure it never happens again." As we made our way back through the forest, I could feel the shadows lurking just out of sight. I knew this was only the beginning. The encounter had changed us, leaving scars that would never fully heal, and whispers of new mysteries danced just beyond the horizon. But one thing was clear: I had faced my past, and though it hurt, I had survived. Now I had to find the strength to confront whatever lay ahead. The journey was far from over, and I could feel the promise of more challenges lurking in the dark. As we stepped away from the Tree of Laments, the forest closed in around us, the whispers of the past still echoing in my mind. The weight of my unresolved feelings pressed heavily on my chest, and with every step, I felt the darkness lurking just beyond the edges of our circle of light. Jenna and Ethan walked close beside me, their presence a fragile comfort, but I could sense the shadows shifting. "Marcus," Ethan said, breaking the heavy silence, "what if we're not done? What if whatever we stirred up doesn't just fade away?" His voice was edged with concern, and I could see the fear reflected in Jenna's eyes. I opened my mouth to reassure them, but the words stuck in my throat. I had faced my past, but what if the past wasn't done with me? What if it sought retribution, demanding more than just recognition? Just then, a low rumble rolled through the trees and the ground trembled beneath our feet. A cold wind howled, carrying with it the anguished cries from the tree, a reminder of our unfinished business. I turned back, the Tree of Laments looming ominously, its branches twisting like skeletal fingers reaching for us. "Run!" I shouted as the shadow surged forth, thicker and darker than before, wrapping around the clearing like a storm. We sprinted through the forest, the air crackling with tension, each step echoing the urgency of our escape. But I could feel it. Something was coming for us, something that thrived on our fear and guilt. As we reached the edge of the woods, I stumbled, glancing back. The darkness seemed to pulse as if alive, and I realized we had only scratched the surface of what lay ahead. "Go!" I yelled to Jenna and Ethan, pushing them towards safety. But as I turned to face the encroaching shadows, a single thought pierced through my mind. The battle was far from over. I stood there, heart racing, knowing that whatever lurked in the dark had claimed me. And then, silence. The shadows closed in, and I was left standing at the precipice of my fears, uncertain of what awaited me in the dark. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Share with your friends so they can also embark on this mystery-filled adventure. Leave a comment below telling us your favorite part or what kind of ending you'd like to see in a future story. My name is Silas. Have you ever felt the weight of a secret so profound that it seemed to bend the very fabric of reality? One quiet night, while I was patrolling the banks of a river that seemed to float between the realms of the living and the spectral, I stumbled upon a sight that would haunt my dreams. A gathering of hooded figures shrouded in darkness, performing a ritual by the water's edge, evoking an ancient pact that felt as old as the trees surrounding us. The river, cloaked in a ghostly mist, appeared to hold secrets that could alter the fate of anyone daring enough to draw near. Since I took on the role of a forest ranger in the Tongass National Forest, I had learned to listen to the whispers of nature and the stories passed down through generations. Yet nothing could have prepared me for the reality of what many referred to as the Ghost River. Tales of guardians that protect this land and the pacts they forge were common, but until that fateful night, they had seemed like mere folklore, tales spun to instill respect for the wild. As I stood there, shivering in the chill of the night air, I realized that the myths were more real and terrifying than I could ever have imagined. Compelled by a mixture of intrigue and dread, I decided to investigate the remnants of the ritual. I found ancient inscriptions etched into the riverbanks, symbols that hinted at a connection between the guardians of the twilight and forces far beyond our comprehension. With each discovery, the tension mounted. It became clear that those who ventured too close might find their destinies intertwined with a sinister agreement, threatening not just the safety of the park, but the delicate balance between our world and the supernatural. As I walked deeper into the woods, the trees loomed over me like silent sentinels, their gnarled branches twisting in the wind as if whispering warnings. The forest felt alive, a character in its own right, its shadows flickering with a pulse that matched the rhythm of my racing heart. Memories flooded back of my childhood spent exploring these woods with my father, who had vanished without a trace years ago. The echoes of his laughter still haunted me, intertwining with the present as I navigated the familiar yet uncanny terrain. The sensation of being watched crept over me, prickling my skin. I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was aware of my every step, as if it held the key to the secrets I sought. I recalled the stories my father used to tell me about the forest spirits, guardians of the land who demanded respect and reverence. But those tales had always felt like bedtime stories, until now. But as night fell, something inexplicable happened. As night fell, the shadows around me deepened, and the air grew thick with an unnatural energy. I could feel the forest shifting, its very essence pulsating with the secrets it harbored. My heart raced, each beat echoing in my ears like a warning. It was then that I heard it, a low, haunting melody drifting through the trees, beckoning me deeper into the woods. The sound was both beautiful and chilling, an invitation and a threat wrapped in one. I followed the music, my instincts battling with my curiosity. As I pushed through the underbrush, I stumbled into a clearing illuminated by the ethereal glow of the Ghost River. The sight before me froze me in place. The hooded figures from earlier were still there, their forms swaying in unison, chanting in a language I couldn't comprehend. The air around them shimmered, and I could feel the pull of their energy as if it were a blanket threatening to suffocate me. Suddenly, a figure stepped away from the group, breaking the spell that held me captive. She was tall, with long dark hair cascading down her back, her face partially obscured by the hood of her cloak. But I could see her eyes, piercing and ancient, as if they held the wisdom of centuries. "You shouldn't be here," she warned, her voice smooth like the surface of the river, yet laced with urgency. I was just curious," I stammered, feeling an immediate connection to her, as if she understood my plight better than I did. "What are you doing?" She hesitated, her gaze flickering back to the gathering. "You're treading on sacred ground, Silas. The pact is being renewed, and those who interrupt it risk the wrath of the guardians." I shivered at the mention of my name, a reminder that I was not as hidden as I thought. "What pact? What are you talking about?" I pressed, desperation creeping into my voice. The truth felt just out of reach, and I needed to grasp it before the darkness enveloped me entirely. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "There are forces at play. Here, Silas, forces that transcend our understanding. The guardians protect this land, but they also require sacrifices to maintain the balance. Your presence here could tip the scales." Her eyes locked onto mine, and I felt the weight of her words. It was as if she could see straight through me, peeling back the layers of my past, exposing the raw wounds that had never healed. "What kind of sacrifices?" I asked, my throat dry. "Souls," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "The guardians demand offerings, and those drawn to the river are often the ones who pay the price." My mind raced to the stories my father told me, the ones I had dismissed as mere folklore. The pieces began to fit together in unsettling ways. Could his disappearance be tied to this? A part of me wanted to flee, to escape this nightmare, but the other part, the part that craved answers, kept me rooted in place. Suddenly, one of the hooded figures turned, their gaze locking onto mine. "You," the figure hissed, pointing, an accusatory finger. "You've broken the boundary. You must choose, join us or leave. But know this, the river will not let you go easily." Panic surged within me as I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. I glanced back at the woman who looked torn between helping me and adhering to the ancient rules of her order. "You must decide quickly," she urged, her voice a mix of fear and determination. I was at a crossroads, teetering on the brink of a decision that could alter my fate and the fate of the forest itself. The weight of my father's legacy pressed down on me, and as the river shimmered ominously, I knew that whatever path I chose would lead me deeper into the heart of darkness. "Please," I breathed, "I need to understand." But as the figures began to close in, I realized that understanding might come at a cost I wasn't ready to pay. The forest held its breath, and I stood poised on the edge of an abyss from which I might never return. As the figures advanced, my heart thundered in my chest, and I felt the weight of the forest pressing down on me. The woman's eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place. Fear? Regret? I felt the air around me crackle, the melody from before rising to a fever pitch, wrapping around me like tendrils of smoke. Suddenly the ground trembled, and I stumbled back, nearly losing my footing. A blinding flash of light erupted from the river, illuminating the clearing in a spectral glow. The figures paused, their chants faltering, and for a moment everything hung in the balance. Then, from the depths of the river, a figure emerged, a ghostly apparition with a face I recognized all too well. "Dad," I gasped, disbelief crashing over me like a wave. He stood there, translucent, his expression a mixture of sorrow and longing. The world around me faded as I was drawn to him, memories flooding back, his laughter, his stories of the forest, the warnings he never fully explained. "Silas," he spoke, his voice echoing with a haunting resonance. "You must leave this place. It has claimed me, and it will claim you too." My breath caught in my throat. "But why? You disappeared. Was it the guardians? Did you make a sacrifice?" Each question spilled out, desperate to connect the fragments of my past to this shocking present. He shook his head, and the movement seemed to send ripples through the air. I was a fool drawn by the allure of the river. I thought I could control it, that I could protect you from the darkness. But I was wrong. The guardians do not forgive easily." His words sent a chill through me. "What do you mean? What did you do?" The woman stepped forward, her expression shifting from fear to sympathy. "He was trying to break the pact, to alter the fate of this land. But in doing so, he bound himself to the river, a trap for those who seek to defy the guardians." I felt the ground beneath me pulse, as if the forest itself reacted to the revelation. "You did this for me?" I asked, my voice cracking. "You sacrificed yourself to protect me?" "I thought I could change things, Silas, but I was naive," he replied, his voice trembling with the weight of regret. "Now, the guardians demand a new offering, a soul to replace the one they lost. If you do not choose now, they will take what is left of me." The hooded figures began to chant again, the rhythm growing more intense, drowning out my thoughts in an overwhelming wave of sound. My mind raced as I tried to process the harsh reality. I was not just a bystander. I was part of this twisted legacy. The woman's intentions, the guardian's demands, they all connected back to me in ways I couldn't yet comprehend. Suddenly, the ground beneath me erupted, and a fissure opened, revealing a chasm that seemed to stretch into the depths of the earth. I gasped, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. The forest was alive, and its hunger was insatiable. "Silas!" My father's voice cut through the chaos, a lifeline amid the swirling darkness. "You must choose. Save yourself or save me." As the ground trembled and the figures closed in, I felt the weight of my choices bearing down on me, the air heavy with the scent of fate and fear. I was no longer just a seeker of truth. I had become a pawn in a game far more complex than I had ever imagined. And in that moment, I stood at the precipice of an unfathomable darkness, caught between the legacy of my father and the sinister allure of the river, with my very soul hanging in the balance. I stood there, frozen in the heart of the storm, my father's ghostly figure wavering in and out of focus, his sorrowful eyes pleading with me. The chanting of the hooded figures crescendoed, a cacophony of despair that wrapped around my mind, squeezing tighter with each heartbeat. "Silas," he called again, urgency cracking his voice. "You must decide. The river's grip is tightening." The fissure beneath my feet yawned wider, consuming the earth and echoing with a low guttural growl, like the very essence of the forest was awakening. My heart raced as I felt the pull of the chasm, a dark siren call that threatened to drag me into its depths. "What do I do?" I shouted, desperation clawing at my throat. "How do I choose?" The woman stepped closer, her features illuminated by the spectral light, revealing a face etched with lines of knowledge and pain. "You must confront the guardians, Silas. They are not merely spirits, they are the embodiment of this land's will. To save your father, you must take the burden upon yourself," she said, her voice firm yet laced with empathy. "Take the burden?" I echoed, incredulity rising within me. "What does that even mean?" "It means you must be willing to face the consequences of your lineage," she replied, her eyes locking onto mine with a fierce intensity. "It means you must sacrifice a piece of your soul to break the pact, become the protector instead of the prey." The hooded figures chanting reached a fever pitch, their shadows dancing menacingly against the trees, and the air thickened with an otherworldly energy. I could feel the weight of their collective gaze, their intent raw and palpable. They were not just witnesses. They were the architects of this moment, the guardians of the forest's ancient magic. "Silas," my father urged, his voice a haunting melody. "You are stronger than you think. You can rewrite the fate that binds us. Choose to protect, not to perish." Sweat trickled down my brow as I fought against the mounting pressure. The fissure beckoned, promising freedom from this torment, but at a price I was not ready to pay. "But what if I fail?" I spat, fear choking my words. "What if I lose myself?" The woman's expression softened, and for a fleeting moment, I saw the flicker of hope in her eyes. "You won't be alone," she said. "We will stand with you. but you must take the first step. The ground trembled again, and I felt the forest's pulse beneath me, urging me forward. The decision loomed like a dark cloud, heavy and suffocating. With every ounce of my being, I fought against the tide of despair, searching for the strength within me to confront the truth of my inheritance. Then I choose, I declared, voice, steady despite the chaos around me. I choose to confront the guardians. I will break this cycle. As the words left my lips, the forest erupted in a cacophony of sound, the figures around me shifting as if the air itself had transformed. My heart raced as I took a step toward the chasm, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The moment hung suspended in time, the air thick with anticipation, as the guardians stirred from their slumber, and I prepared to meet my fate. I stepped into the gaping maw of the fissure, my breath hitching as the ground beneath me trembled. The guardians materialized from the shadows, their forms shifting like smoke through the trees. They loomed over me, eyes like burning coals, and I felt their weight pressing down on my shoulders, a testament to the power they wielded. "What is it you seek, child of the forest?" one of them intoned, voice echoing like thunder through the darkness. My heart raced, but I stood my ground. "I seek to break the cycle," I replied, my voice stronger than I felt. "I wish to protect, not to perish." The guardians exchanged glances, their expressions inscrutable. The air crackled with energy as they deliberated, the tension thick enough to slice. Suddenly the woman, the one who had guided me, stepped forward, her presence calming yet fierce. "He speaks truth, ancient ones. He bears the burden willingly. Let him prove his worth." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, with a collective nod, they raised their hands, and the ground beneath me split open further, revealing a swirling vortex of light and shadow. I felt a pull, a magnetic force drawing me in, and I braced myself, my heart pounding like a war drum. "Face your fears, Silas. Embrace your destiny." My father's voice echoed in my mind as I plunged into the maelstrom. The world dissolved around me, and suddenly I was standing in a vast expanse of memories, faces of those I loved, moments of joy and sorrow. I saw my mother, her gentle smile twisting into anguish. I felt the weight of my father's despair as he faded away. With each memory, I realized the burden of my lineage was not just mine to bear. It was a shared suffering, a legacy of pain that had to be confronted. As I fought through the current, a sharp pain shot through my chest and I gasped, feeling a piece of my essence tear away. The guardians' voices surged around me, chanting incantations in a language I couldn't understand. But somehow, I felt their strength coursing through me. I was not just fighting for myself, but for the souls entwined in this legacy. When the vortex finally spat me out, I collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. My body throbbed with pain, a reminder of the sacrifice I had made. I looked up, and the guardians were now still, their forms shimmering like the last rays of sunlight. I could feel their approval, yet the weight of what I had endured settled heavily on my heart. The woman approached, her expression a mixture of pride and sorrow. "You have faced the guardians and survived, but know this, the scars you bear are not just physical. The forest is safe for now, but shadows linger, watching, waiting for the next moment of weakness." As I looked around, I noticed the hooded figures had dispersed, their chanting fading into the rustle of the trees. However, some remained, their eyes intent upon me, whispering among themselves. I felt a chill run down my spine, sensing that our encounter had not merely resolved a conflict, but had awakened something deeper within the forest, a power that now flowed through me. "What will happen to my father?" I asked, my voice trembling. The woman hesitated, her gaze far away. "His fate is tied to yours, Silas. As you protect this land, he may find peace, or he may continue to wander until you uncover the truth of his past." A shiver ran through me at her words, and I knew then that my journey was far from over. The forest had revealed only a fraction of its secrets, and I was now its reluctant guardian, tasked with unraveling a tapestry of mysteries that stretched beyond my comprehension. As I walked away from the fissure, my heart heavy with the burdens I had chosen, I couldn't shake the feeling that something darker lurked just beyond the tree line, waiting for the right moment to strike. The echoes of my father's spirit resonated within me, a reminder that my choices would ripple through time, affecting not just me, but everyone I held dear. And as the shadows deepened around me, I could only wonder what other truths awaited me in the heart of the forest. I pressed onward through the dense thicket of trees, the weight of the guardian's verdict still heavy on my shoulders. Each step felt heavier, as if the forest itself was testing my resolve. I could sense the shadows growing denser, the whispers of the ancient woods echoing warnings of the trials ahead. Eventually, I reached a clearing where two paths diverged, each shrouded in darkness. One path led deeper into the heart of the forest, pulsing with an ominous energy, while the other beckoned me toward a distant light, flickering like a dying star. My heart raced as I realized that I had come to a fateful choice. Two equally terrible endings lay before me. The first path whispered promises of power. If I ventured into the darkness, I could embrace the very shadows that had haunted my family, wielding their strength to protect the forest. But I knew this path would corrupt my spirit, binding me to the very evil I sought to defeat, transforming me into a wraith of despair. I could easily become what I feared most, a guardian turned harbinger of darkness. The second path called to me with the faint light of redemption. It promised a chance to save my father, to uncover the truth of his suffering. Yet, I sensed that this journey would demand a sacrifice far greater than I could imagine, perhaps my own essence or the very memories of those I loved. It was a path filled with uncertainty, leading to a future where I might never return. I took a deep breath, my heart heavy as I stood at the crossroads, knowing that whichever choice I made would shape not just my fate, but the fate of the forest and its inhabitants forever. Time seemed to stretch, and in that moment, I understood that my destiny was intertwined with the choices I made. With one last glance at the flickering light, I steeled myself to venture into the darkness, surrendering to the shadows that beckoned me. As I stepped forward, the forest trembled, the air thickening with anticipation. I had chosen my fate, but the true consequences were yet to unfold. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Share with your friends so they can also embark on this mystery-filled adventure, and leave a comment below telling us your favorite part or what kind of ending you'd like to see in a future story.